Thank you. Hello everybody. We will be live streaming today's meeting, so in a moment, when the feedback sorts itself out.
Can you look at that way? That way?
Okay. We're live streaming the meeting, so I have to do a countdown so the techie people know when to start recording the meeting or live streaming the meeting. So if you bear with me, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, live streaming. Okay. Welcome to members and the public to this meeting of the North Yorkshire Council, Skipton and Ripon Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Nathan Hull, Chair of this committee, and the Vice Chair is Councillor Andy Brown. Please can I remind everyone that today's meeting is being audio recorded as well as broadcast and live streamed via the Council's website. The recordings will be made publicly available in the next few days on the website. As it's a public meeting, people in attendance are allowed to record council meetings. I've not been notified that anyone has contacted Democratic Services that they wish to record the meeting today. Is there anyone present in the room who will be recording any of today's proceedings? If you could let us know now. Okay, I don't see any hands going up. Okay, thank you. In terms of housekeeping, please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Toilet facilities are located on this floor at the end of the corridor behind me. I've not been made aware that there's going to be a fire alarm expected this afternoon, so if the fire alarm does sound, please gather in the main square at the front of these offices and exit the nearest fire exit that you can find. The officers in attendance today to support this meeting are Stuart Mills, Development Management Team Manager, Andrea Muscroft, who's Development Management Team Manager and Case Officer for items 5 and 6, Mike Parks, who's the Case Officer for item 4, Daniel Child, who's the Case Officer for item 7, Kate Lavelle, who's a solicitor from the local authority, Vicky Davies and David Smith from Democratic Services, and we also have, I understand, Daniel Herbert from Highways, who's here to offer support for items 5 and 6 on today's agenda. So turning to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Vicky?
No apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So agenda item 2, minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 5th November 2024. The minutes are available on pages 5 and 6 of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments in respect of the minutes?
No, Chairman.
No comments? Okay. So could somebody propose the minutes, please? Councillor Brown and Councillor Heseltine seconded. Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? I'll go to Councillor Heseltine.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Concerning the farm at Bank Newton, ZA 24/25923. Chairman, it has been brought to my attention by the North Yorkshire Council Legal Department that complaints have been lodged against myself. It is said by objectors to the Barton Road major housing application that I should not take part in the debate or decision on this application at the partners. I am also informed these complaints have been dismissed by North Yorkshire Council and I have no case to answer on any bias in the determining the Martin Road guardrail housing development. In these allegations, the complainant clearly states that having lived on Martin Road, I should have recognised the suggested problems. I lived for a short while on the High Street. That's the very busy A65 of Main Road in Gargrave, but that was several years ago. I enjoyed it as well. I hereby clearly state that I have never lived on Martin Road ever. Constructive opposition I entirely accept. Telling lies to further one's opinion is beyond the pale. Knowing me spreading blatant lies is really scraping.
Could I just stop you there? I think we've heard enough about, I think your main point was it that you didn't live on Martin Road?
Just one sentence, please, Mark.
And
I find these allegations extremely stressful to my family and friends and myself. I'm waiting an apology.
Thank you, Councillor Heseltine. Does anyone else have any declarations of interest? Okay, so there are none. So if we move then on to the first item of substantive business, which is agenda item 7. If I could pass over to the case officer to introduce their report, please.
Good afternoon, yes, Mr. Chairman. Site at Kirby Malzard in the Midland Pastoral Landscape. The applicant is Braley Homes, which is owned by the council. That's the reason the application is before members this afternoon. You might recall back in June there was an application to use natural stone and air source heat pumps on the site. This application is basically to change the colour of the doors and windows to those which were previously approved. So on the next slide, the site is at the western end of Kirby Malzard. That's the road out to Ladderton and then the road off to the left of the screen there, just close to the moors basically. So it is sort of an entrance point into the village. Just going from Ladderton to on the next slide. That is the approved layout. It goes back to a scheme which was approved for a previous developer. Braley have taken the site on from that developer. So there's 30 odd dwellings there, and at the top left hand corner that's an existing development from the 1990s, which is Richmond Garth. On the next slide, that is basically the change that is being proposed. We're going from anthracite to stone grey in colour on the doors and the windows. One of the doors, I think the garage door, actually wasn't specified before, but they are now all going to be that stone grey colour. Don't really have a problem with that. There is an issue that's cropped up, which on the next slide is concerning the roof materials. This goes back to the original permission, which was 4 years ago. The then case officer didn't notice the design access statement and was on a fundamental error in that it refers to Richmond Garth properties having artificial slate on the roof, which, as you can see from that Google Street Scene photo, is quite plainly, if they're artificial slates, they're exceptionally good. They look like natural slates to me. The problem is that has then rolled forward into the plans on the current applications, and on the right hand side are the 2 samples we've seen so far of artificial slates. As you can see, there is quite a noticeable step between each slate, which would be out of character with Richmond Garth, the rest of Kirby Malzard generally. You do also get quite stepped slates where it's stone slate, but this is natural blue slate. So in issuing the new permission, which will then become the permission for development as a result of this application, proposing just tweaking the conditions so that it allows for materials other than what is shown on the drawings to be approved, which then gives us the opportunity to approve natural slate. And that is all, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the case officer? Right then. Okay. I understand we don't have any speakers in respect of this application, so moving straight on to debate, if we're going to have one. Does anyone have anything to say? Councillor Branston.
Propose approval.
Second, Chairman.
So that's second by Councillor Williams. Okay. Does anyone have anything else they wish to say about this application? Councillor Williams.
Only the one, which is that given that this application is by ourselves effectively, I think it would be more polite to other applicants if our applications were actually heard at the end of our agenda rather than at the beginning of it. But that's a procedural point rather than in the merits of this particular application. But I do think it does send the wrong message to members of the public who are being asked to wait whilst we deal with our own internal matters first.
I think the point is well made and noted. It's something that we'll discuss after the meeting. Thank you. Okay, if there's nobody else that wants to make any further comments in respect to this application, we've been asked to vote to approve the application subject to the conditions as listed. So all those in favour?
That's a record.
So that's unanimous with. Thank you very much. If you'd like to make way for the next case off the table. David, are we actually live streaming? Someone's just emailed me to say that they can't see it.
We are live streaming. I also can't see it on my phone, but that's an IT issue accounting all thing.
Okay.
But I am trying to talk.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to agenda item 5. I'm going to pass over to the case officer to do her report. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. The application before members relates to the construction of an agricultural building on an existing farmstead in Bank Newton. The proposal has received 10 objections as detailed within the officer's report and 1 observation regarding the proposal itself. Members will also have received a late information report outlining some of the additional photos and comments made. Most of those items have been covered within the officer's report. This slide is showing the actual site location for the proposed agricultural building. As we can see from the slide, it is located to the north of the cluster of existing agricultural storage buildings and east of the actual farm holding. This slide is an aerial view of the actual application site. So in here we can see, I'm just going to put my lasers on, this is one of the original agricultural buildings. These are the other storage buildings we've got here, and this is the site of the existing hard standings, which is there present on site at the moment, and that is currently used for the storage of feed. So the proposal is to construct a building on top of the existing hard standing that is on site. To give help with a bit of context in terms of the surrounding area, it is obviously surrounded by other farms and farm agricultural land. So it's just to give an idea in terms of this. So we've got a couple of the farms. We've got like Priest Home Dairy Farm, we've got Bank Grange Farm here, Newton Hall Farm. So there's a number of farming communities around in this particular area. Now the site itself, which we've got in this location here, can be accessed via Martin Road, which is down through here, or can be accessed via the A59 in this direction here. It is important to note that the building would be served by an actual agricultural fields over by the A59 where the current wheat would be grown and then transported onto the site. This is just a couple of quick slides just to show that this is the actual location of the land that is currently being used for the whole crop cereals, which would then be stored within the building, and this is beyond the A59. This is also just to help members appreciate, so we've got the farming complex in terms of this area here on the slide, and then this is the other area of land that they already farm within the area. So again, this is just a proposed site plan, and it's just showing the proposed storage building, as previously mentioned, would be constructed already on the existing hard standing on the site, which is currently used to store feed. So this one, in terms of it, as set out in the officer's report at paragraph 10.1 to 10.6, The principle of an agricultural building is deemed acceptable and accords with the policy requirements. Turning to the visual impacts of the building, the proposed building has been designed to reflect those already existing on the site and will be constructed using similar materials. Officers also have considered that the replacement of the existing storage arrangement, which consists of feed under plastic holdings, would result in a visual improvement when viewed from outside the site, looking back towards the site. The proposed building would also include bird boxes as well, and as such the building would be seen within the context of the farm and would not give rise to any unacceptable harm. As outlined on the late information report, the building would also incorporate solar panels to help address climate change, and this would be controlled by a condition. As such, the proposal accords with the policy requirements regarding design, sustainability and biodiversity. This is just to show exactly where there is proposed to be a passing place in terms of that. So as you turn up into the actual site, there is an area where there's 2 gates that you can see on this middle of the slide here. And what's proposed is to increase this area here to include it and make it as a passing place. This is also controlled by a condition in terms of this. An alternative location for a passing place was considered, but actually it was deemed to be unacceptable. So this one is the one that's going forward. The next couple of slides have been taken by the officer in terms of the existing highways following concerns raised by residents. It's important to note that there are no alterations proposed to the existing access that serves the farming enterprise. The concrete pad which members viewed on site is already in use for the storage of crops, and thus the enclosement of this area would not give rise to any additional vehicle movements that are not already in existence. In addition, the applicant does mention that the building would be used for housing crops that would be accessed off the A59, thus taking traffic away from Martin Road. The images that you've got in front of you, the officer took them at 9 o'clock in the morning just to show that there are clear, obviously, viewpoints up and down that road, so you have clear visibility. Again, they took them at 12 p.m. So again, just about, there are some unofficial passing places along that road as you go through it. And again, they took some at 3 o'clock as well. These are just some site photos. So this is the area of high standing that we've got here. So you can just see at the moment they've got some crops on the back, and at the moment they've got some agricultural vehicles on the front of the building, or in front of the hard standing, I should say. And then this is just one of those, the existing storage buildings on site, where it will construct off in this area here. So in conclusion, the development is considered acceptable as it would not have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area, nor would the proposal have an adverse impact on the immediate occupiers of neighbouring properties. The proposal would provide biodiversity and sustainable benefits. In terms of it, the concerns raising regarding highway safety along Martin Road are noted. However, as outlined, this is an existing farming enterprise that is only seeking to construct a building for the improved storage of feed on the site that is already currently stored there and is already being transported around the existing highway. Based on what we've got here, it's also important to note that there is also a strong agricultural community at the area, and these farms also use the existing highway network as well as contractors. The proposal would utilise the existing access point. Traffic movements have been provided by the applicant, and the Highway Authority have been consulted and have conducted their own traffic survey. Consequently, the Highway Authority are satisfied that the impact of the proposal will not have a detrimental impact on highway safety, the capacity or the efficiency of the existing highway network or the surrounding area, and therefore the proposal is recommended for approval, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions for the case officer? I'll go to Councillor Ireton first and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned that there's a field opposite the 59, I think you said, that was going to produce the grain. What size is the field, please?
Good question. I believe, and I might have to double check, but I've got it on the slide on the screen at the moment, but it was something like 133 hectares or something like that. I would need to just double check, but it is on.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah,
find
so
that.
it is a substantial.
Yes, it is.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Councillor Brown.
Couple of questions. Firstly, the use as a storage area. Is that something we can actually condition, or is it in the broad category of agricultural use that would mean that at a later stage it could be used for housing cattle if they so chose? What's the situation there? Can we condition that it remains as agricultural storage?
Sorry, my mic on there. Yeah, we could condition it to so it's just between storage, because obviously there are other people in and around the area, but yeah, we could condition that if members wanted to.
Okay. Second question is for Daniel, really. The collision history, 2 collisions in 5 years. Is that typical for a road with such low volumes of traffic?
Which road are you referring to?
I'm referring to the Highways report, which indicates that
So the Bagnute access road itself?
yeah, that it says that there was very light use of traffic. There were 2 collisions in 5 years, and I want to know whether that was typical of roads with this kind of low usage of traffic.
It's not untypical, let's put it that way. 2 collisions in 5 years would not be considered in any way as a road safety issue to be resolved.
Okay. And just my understanding of the law around developing concrete standing areas, etc. Am I right that it's permitted development that you can do that on the farm, and then that when you make the later application it's a brownfield area?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, farmers have certain permitted development rights in terms of what they can do, and one of them, they can create hard standing. Whether you class it as brownfield or whatever, that really doesn't come into it. It's got its own permitted development rights to do it.
So there's no reason it couldn't be extended. Sorry, David.
Back to Councillor Hyde.
Yeah, I'd just like to. I always thought that farms weren't brownfield sites, so it would never become a brownfield site. Am I correct in that?
Yes, you are.
Sloppy use of language, I accept it.
Anyone with any further questions for the case officers? Can I just...
Sorry, there is one more.
Go on.
Am I right? There's only one new passing place created. Is that correct? There's only one.
Yes, there would be one created by the proposer.
Okay.
Can I just seek clarification? I think I know the answer to this already, but the facility that's proposed will be constructed. It's my understanding that is just essentially to cover storage that is already being brought onto site anyway. One of the points I think one of the objectors made that it will increase the food storage capacity on site. Is there any suggestion that this will result in any kind of intensification of farming activities on the site?
There's nothing before the council to indicate that.
Anybody else with any questions? If not, we'll move over to the speakers. So those of you that are speaking today, I remind you have 3 minutes to speak to the committee. We are quite strict on the timings just for the purposes of fairness to everyone else. So the first person that's down to speak today is an objector, and that's Rachel Berry. Rachel, if you could come forward, and give 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
For the local community, the need for a passing place is not just beneficial but essential. The wording of the condition should be changed to reflect this. Secondly, we'd like some dimensions. Back in 2017, Highways said the passing place needed to be 5 metres wide by 20 metres. Without a more detailed condition, we cannot know whether the suggested passing place will do enough to mitigate our concerns about the unsuitability of the access and ongoing amenity issues, both areas of conflict with policy EC1. The damage to the listed Changeline Bridge is self-evident. It was first hit 6 years ago in 2018, as the photographs show. Repairs have been awaited ever since. In 2020, the Canal and River Trust wrote, the continued use of the bridge for vehicles in excess of 18 tonnes could, if left unchecked, contribute to the eventual closure or collapse of the bridge. 21 months ago, the towpath was closed. Sauber Dairy has continued to expand. There is now 12,220 square metres of consented development. This year, a large crack has appeared halfway along the structure. Repairs are urgent. Many others rely on the bridge as the only public highway into their properties too. You do not have a written statement from the Canal and River Trust about the bridge's ability to withstand more heavy loads, the planned repairs, funding, timescales, length of closure periods. This is needed before a decision is made. All you know today is that the bridge is damaged and you're being asked to grant permission for a 40% increase in silage storage capacity, a significant step change in what is transported in. This is 3,300 cubic metres of additional material, weighing approximately 2,500 tonnes in hundreds of trips, placing the road and bridge under greater strain. The determination of this application should be delayed until the bridge is fully repaired. If this cannot be achieved by way of condition, permission should be refused. The high-risk assessment does not account for the dispersed holding. 100% of crops to fill a new shed will come in from outside. The officer's report only mentions the Bank Newton land and omits reference to all other land. 78% of the farmland is in Bracewell, Halton West, Coniston Cold, Gargrave and Flasby. The farmland is connected via the public highway. It's where the crops come in from and where the slurry goes to, in conveyor belts of movements at peak times. The results of the highway survey are not published. We are not told whether they include the peak harvesting periods from June to September. Please halt the supply of new storage today to curb expansion and limit harm on weak infrastructure, poor access and dispersed settlements. It is not sustainable development.
Thank you. We're at 3 minutes there. Thank you very much. Okay, so if I could ask Catherine Downs to come forward. I understand she's a representative from Bank Newton Parish Council.
Bank Newton is situated between Gargrave. Bank Newton is situated between Gargrave and the Martins. It has a beautiful section of the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, a national cycle route and walking routes including the Pennine Way. It's great for public amenity. The application is for a fourth shed. Objections are about the danger created by the fog traffic needed to fill a shed and remove slurry from the site on the roads. The expansion of Sauber Dairy has created great danger to other road users as tractors speed to and from Sauber's satellite sites at Gargrave, Flasby, Coniston Cold, Halton West and West Marton. This creates a tremendous number of return journeys of heavy, noisy farm traffic passing through villages and along narrow roads. Objections about farm traffic and safety include blind bends, lack of passing places, stones on the road, drop-offs and feeling intimidated. Along the routes taken, there is damage to bridges, dry stone walls and ditches. Users of the network of roads have genuine safety concerns. There are accidents caused by overturned trailers, jackknifed vehicles and side swipes. This is the result of Sauber's unsustainable business model, which does not consider neighbours, neighbouring parishes and users of the local infrastructure. We experience huge numbers of tractor movements throughout the summer months, which does not correlate with the 2 weeks in October when highways monitored the traffic. The transport statement provided does not meet regulations, does not provide the necessary facts, or mention the final lane to Salva. Many HGVs deliver sawdust and straw for bedding, dry feed, building materials and concrete all year round. The authorities need to know how many, what dimensions and what weight to make informed decisions to keep people as safe as possible. Changeline Bridge has been severely damaged by traffic going to Salva. The first collision shifted the parapet stones so they overhang. The applicant reported this to me and we had a site meeting with a C&RT engineer. Strikes on the bridge continue. The canal towpath is closed to walkers. There is great concern for the bridge's stability and for how long it can possibly last. Please refuse permission for a false shed until the passing place on the lane is made, the bridge is repaired and we have a proper transport statement so that the situation can be considered in a way that keeps people safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just been told we may have a fire alarm test shortly, contrary to what I said earlier, so if that does happen, please stay seated. If it carries on for more than 30 seconds, then by any means possible, please exit the building. Thank you. So if I could ask Geoffrey Butt to come and speak to us on behalf of Gargrave Parish Council. Thank you.
Hopefully you will have a copy of this photographic pack which was delivered to you yesterday. Now the applicant's revised transport statement in paragraph 2.1 says the only vehicular access to Superderry is via a C-class road, also known as Martin Road, through Gargrave, crossing a Grade 2 listed stone bridge. Images 2 to 5 in this pack show the huge impact of vehicles accessing the dairy through Gargrave. It shows significant safety issues around bottlenecks, which forces milk tankers to collect milk overnight from the dairy. You will recall your site meeting, your site visit to Martin Road in June, where, as pedestrians, you witnessed at first hand the dangers of large volumes of agricultural traffic on narrow roads with few pavements. The chair is on record stating that he would be fearful that one of his children would get squashed by a tractor. Yet today we face even more massive vehicles if this mega dairy is expanded. And while a short section of pavement has now been incorporated into the Martin Road planning conditions, residents are still at risk. There is no space for a pavement at the point where the chair stated his fears. And his fears mirror every single fear of every resident of Gargrave. I would ask you to reflect on the following existential concerns. In 1995, prior to the expansion of the dairy, highways designated the area as a 7.5 tonne, weight restricted, access only area because of the narrow roads, the sharp bends and inadequate bridges. Today, every tractor combo far exceeds these restrictions, resulting in regular damage to roads, pavements and bridges at cost to this authority. The planning history of the site, 22 applications in 20 years, has resulted in hugely increased transport movements. At image 1, you can see that remote parcels of land make up 85% of the requirement to grow silage for the dairy. This already involves hundreds of tractor movements through Gargrave. This pattern of using remote land will increase if this application is successful, resulting in more heavy vehicles through Gargrave. As things stand, there is no safeguard for Gargrave to the massive increase in agricultural traffic. The applicant's cynical statement that volumes will not increase, permission granted or not, should be taken with a trailer load of salt. Craven Local Plan Policy, EC1, states that development should be in the right location. We don't believe this site sits in the right direction and can only be mitigated if a more direct route from the dairy to the A65 is put in place. However, if it is approved, then Church Lane in Gargrave, Martin Road in its entirety must be included in the independent Stage 2 safety audit detailed in the report of the Assistant Director of Planning under conditions 12.1. I urge you to put in place the necessary safeguards for Gargrave. before someone is actually squashed.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Sorry I couldn't be with you at the site visit this morning. I was in a cabinet meeting, but I'm sure you enjoyed travelling the narrow, windy and treacherous roads of my patch. I want to preface this by saying that I am very much on the side of farm businesses and their expansion. But I'm even more on the side of my residents and their safety.
We'll pause.
I thought that was one of the officers. Shut me up. And you've been addressed very eloquently by residents, both of Bank Newton and Gargrave, regarding their concerns. One good thing to come out of this is the requirement for a passing place, which has been asked for years and finally is a requirement put forward by Highways. And I'm very grateful to the applicants for agreeing to that. But do we believe that there will be no increase to traffic on this road? To my knowledge, almost every application that's been made on this site has suggested that there will be no increase in traffic on this road. And I have represented this patch for 13 years. 13 years ago, I didn't get correspondence about road safety on Martin Road. I didn't get complaints about damaged bridges and the edges of roads being destroyed and people having near misses. Now it is a weekly occurrence. And you yourselves in August of this year saw what Martin Road is like when it's busy. And it's not just my end, it's Councillor Soloway's end at West Martin, where the road comes out onto the A59, connects with other land holdings from the applicant. When you made a decision about the Martin Road planning application recently, it was a requirement in the end that a footpath was put in, recognising, as Highways did, the danger to other road users who are now prioritised under the Highway Code, pedestrians, cyclists and so on. This is a very well used road by pedestrians, cyclists, hikers and all sorts of recreational pursuits. It connects up with the canal towpath that predecessor Craven District Council invested considerable sums of public money into. And the whole amenity of those facilities to residents and visitors is at threat from the ever expanding business at Suba Dairy. The fact of the matter is that in itself this may not generate any extension if highways are to be believed, but actually it's just yet one more part of the ever expanding operation here. So every little bit of it is said to not lead to an increase, and yet we've seen something grow over the last 14 years into probably the biggest agricultural enterprise in Craven on the smallest access road with the worst possible access. So as I say, I'm not against this business expanding, but I am for the safety of my residents and other users of that road. And I do ask you to either consider the deferment suggested for the reasons suggested, or to refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. If I could ask Mr. Tom Dodgson to come forward, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Tom Dodgson. I own Salt Dairy alongside my father John. The family have been farming in Bank Newton for over 100 years now, dairy farming all that time. I took over the day-to-day running of the business back in 2010, and over the years the business has had to adapt and grow to ensure that we remain efficient and secure the future for the farm, in the hope that at least one of my 4 boys wishes to take the business on once I retire. As an individual, I spend a great deal of time researching and investing in sustainable projects, not only to reduce carbon footprint, but also to meet the ever-changing growing list of requirements implemented by our governing bodies. Examples of this, we introduced green bedding. This replaced any sawdust brought into the farm, which is one thing we did to try and reduce some traffic. We've already covered a large amount of roof space with solar panels, meaning we're virtually self-sufficient with electric now, and we also sell a little bit of surplus back into the grid. I've read through the report that's been provided today by Isabel and addressed. I feel like it's addressed and satisfied the concerns of most of the objections. I do, however, want to take the opportunity to comment on the traffic in the local area, as there is an incorrect assumption that it's all generated by our farm. Within the recent years, there have been a number of changes within neighbouring farms, and the way they operate their businesses has also led to an increase in farm traffic at certain times of the year, predominantly harvest time. It's important for me to comment, as I do feel it goes unnoticed that myself and neighbouring farms, we do spend quite a considerable amount of time behind the scenes planning and communicating with each other to ensure that we don't operate, we don't harvest at the same time to try and avoid it. We try and run one-way systems, so we're going from a piece of land and back, we're not meeting tractors on the road. This is a direct benefit to all highway users. We do rely on contractors and weather conditions, meaning that at certain times we've got no choice, but we do have to work long hours. But this is something that only happens very few days of the year. The application that's being discussed today is simply to cover the existing storage area, which has been used for a number of years now. You'll have seen it today when you visit the farm. I cannot stress enough that by roofing this over and this development, there will not be any change to the operation of the farm and any traffic that is currently operating. Basically, it just enables us to make a better forage, and it ticks the boxes to make it comply with all the environmental standards that we need to do. There's constant pressure from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if there's nothing further, we'll move to debate. Does anyone would like to kick us off? So I'm just going to ask, Kate just wants to say something.
I think this would be a good time to remind the members that you should always consider carefully whether in any particular case you could reasonably be seen to approach the planning merits of the application with an open mind. If you consider that that's not possible, then you should withdraw from the consideration of this item. Thank you.
Okay. I'm certainly open mind, Chairman.
Right. I'm going to go to Councillor Brown first of all, if I may.
Could I ask a question before I contribute to the debate? We heard that there was a 7.5 tonne weight restriction on these roads some time back, January 95, I think. Does that weight restriction is it still in force?
Yes, the weight restriction is in force. As with any weight restriction on access, it does include an exemption for access. So whilst it is there, it was primarily introduced to stop through traffic between the A65, the A59, the A682. It does allow for local vehicles that are greater than 7.5 tonnes to access land and premises off those streets.
Yeah, I have a number of concerns really. Firstly, the statement that there's no change in the amount of storage seems to me to contradict logic, and also the report submitted by the applicant on transport, applicant's transport statement. This new shed, according to that transport statement, involves 195 loads for each refill. That's a statement of fact from the applicant. Now, obviously, it may well be that the current site requires 195 loads, but from what we saw today, it looked like there was much lighter use of just the flat standing area than there was of the storage sheds. And it looked to me as if it was pretty clear there'd be an increase in traffic. So I think we can only assess this on the assumption there will be some increase in the traffic if you increase the amount of storage that is required. On that basis, I think there's also a number of concerns. I heard the answer about 2 collisions in 5 years being typical. I find that a very hard statement to agree with. If you looked at the volumes in the traffic survey, they were about, 190 a week, something like that. It's very unusual to get 2 collisions in 5 years. It's also very unusual to have the amount of damage we saw on the canal bridge right next to the site. And that was very concerning, to the point where it threatened the safety of that bridge, both for the use and the amenity of other residents. And it also threatened the use of that bridge, which is extensively used for tourism and recreation. There's a lot of walkers, a lot of cyclists along that route area. So I think a 40% increase in silage storage capacity that's covered generates extra traffic. I think there's evidence of damage to a heritage asset, the Leeds-Liverpool Canal Bridge, such that at certain points it's been closed to pedestrian access. And I'm also concerned about the passing place, because I drove away from the site in the direction of the deliveries of grain, and it was about 4 or 5 miles, something like that. Narrow road, only really room for one vehicle, certainly not room for vehicles with trailers and other traffic. One passing place in the whole thing seems to me strange. And I'm also not sure what guarantees we've got or can impose that that's the only route that's used. I can't see how we can prevent the use of Martin Road if any driver chooses to go that way. And we've seen photographic evidence of very large vehicles using the road. Admittedly, may not be directly associated with this development. So I think there's for that level of traffic, there's significant accidents. I also think it's significant that the road was designated as being a 7.5 tonne weight restriction. That says something about what highways thought was appropriate for traffic on the use of it. And normal access to get to your farm, understandable, but extensive deliveries for this kind of operation along blind bends, narrow roads, on a road that's over bridges that are not up to the weight of traffic, I think is problematic. So I'm torn between proposing deferment for a traffic assessment in September so we can see the real situation at the most significant time of the year, or proposing a rejection on the grounds of traffic and heritage impact to the bridge.
Councillor Williams.
If the member would like some assistance, I'd be happy to second a proposal for deferment for the traffic report. I wouldn't be prepared to second an outright refusal.
That might well have concentrated my mind on turning a piece of airy speculation into a firm proposal. I propose we defer it until we've seen a comprehensive traffic survey conducted by an independent agency that is conducted in September on the extent of the traffic use and the impact on and whether the road network can sustain it.
On that basis, I am happy to second that proposal, and I'll speak later if necessary.
Councillor Middleton.
On that proposal that we don't use North Yorkshire Highways professional officers, what's our reason for that? Don't we believe that our professional officers are up to the task? I certainly do.
Could you just say that again, but put your microphone on so people at the back can hear what you're saying? Thank you.
The resolution just proposed to Chairman to defer and then to do this traffic survey, but the survey will be done by an independent organisation. Why not North Yorkshire Highways, who are the professional body?
Is that a question or an observation?
I'm minded that on the housing development on Martin Road, the same suggestion was made about possibly using an independent consultant, and that was overturned, that we rely on our professional officers.
Can I just while we're having this debate, I'm wondering what the traffic survey, what new information that would give us, because all it would be doing would be monitoring the ongoing traffic that's going in and out of the site, and that's of lawful use. So would it be telling us more than we already know?
My argument is we need to understand the baseline of stress on the traffic system, and I think it's difficult when people have written reports at any stage in the exercise to then be asked to review your own homework and rethink objectively. And it could well be that an assessment in September would reveal that there isn't much strain on the highways and it's quite capable of taking additional traffic. I'd also like to look at exactly what the additional traffic would be from, in a reasonable estimate, from increasing the surface storage area, because I'm not convinced by the statement that there would be none, but I could be wrong. I'd like an independent person to look at that rather than somebody that's already drawn a conclusion.
Councillor Ireton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the officers really, we're looking at a building being covered, a concrete pad being covered in planning terms. I fully understand the stress of the residents and road users that use that road. We've got evidence here. We've drove it this morning, which was very light traffic this morning. There were a lot of pedestrians out, a lot of dog walkers and cyclists out on it. But we're actually looking at an existing operation and a business that can continue and operate as it is doing now. But what they're suggesting is to cover that building, which will be an environmental advantage to keep that, the weather out of that grain, etc., that's going to be stored there, and any leakage. So to defer it, I don't really see the advantage of it. I think we know there's a traffic problem. We know there's heavy goods using that, distressing residents. We know there's damage to this bridge. And I would like to ask, before I finish, Chairman, whether Highways should be asking for a contribution from the farmer to repair that. I don't know any other farms are actually leading off that road, but certainly if it was a forestry harvesting wood, we would expect them to be putting something in to contribute into the repair of the damage done. But that is a question to the highways officer. I don't think it's a planning issue. Correct me if I'm wrong. So therefore, I can't support the deferment because we can carry on using it without covering it. You know. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on the point about the bridge. The bridge is an asset owned by the Canal and Rivers Trust. There is some damage to it, and the bridge has been assessed. There is a debate between the council's bridge engineers and the Canal and River Trust bridge engineers as to what the load capacity is, depending on how you assess it. But there is a scheme in development to repair and strengthen the bridge, to repair the expander walls, one of which has been damaged with the stone collapsing onto the towpath, which is why the towpath has been closed, the bridge hasn't been closed, and to also repair the parapets. So there is a scheme in development which the costs are being shared between the Canal and Rivers Trust and North Yorkshire's the Highway Authority.
And does that bridge repair, does it include the damage to the road at the other side, which is shown in these pictures here? You're aware that
yes.
you quite clearly see the big vehicles screwing over to get over the bridge.
Yes, the bridge will be repaired, but there will also be some resurfacing of the highway
and
across the bridge.
Reinforcing that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask a question on this to clarify? Just to,
I would just like to say before we finish, I hope that the speed in which this bridge is repaired, really through the use of the towpath, as we heard Councillor Myers mentioning, the towpath and the danger to the road users, that is why it's closed, I presume. I hope it's sooner than what the bridge in Coniston Cove is taking to get repaired, because that is a listed bridge with concrete blocks being repaired by it. Thank you.
Plastic bollards.
Point of information, Chair.
Plastic bollards.
No, they're actually blocks in the bridge.
Councillor Hyson interestingly raises the issue of whether we can condition that there's a contribution to the repair of the bridge, which currently is happening entirely at public money and public expense. And I'd like to also ask whether we're entitled to condition that the development could only take place after the bridge had been repaired and any such contribution had been made. So I'm trying to keep an open mind on the right approach here, but I think that to me it's an important question.
Interject there. I'm at the risk of sounding mildly ridiculous, so please don't laugh at me at the back of the building. We haven't actually seen any video evidence of who's damaged the bridge. So to condition that and put that burden on the applicant is something I'm not convinced we can actually lawfully do, because until we have evidence of who's caused the damage, how can we lawfully ask for a contribution from the applicant?
Well, Chairman, that's why I asked how many other road users are actually using that part of the road. We know from the site visit this morning that it leads to the dairy farm. Is there other farms that are using big vehicles, heavy vehicles that are doing damage? Yeah.
Whilst I don't disagree with what you're saying, I can draw my own conclusions from what I've seen. I'm not, if we're deciding this on the basis of pure evidence, I've seen no actual evidence. I've seen photographs of traffic on the bridge, but I've seen no actual hard evidence of any traffic that's going to that site causing that damage. And so I'm going to ask Kate if she can just give us some guidance on this. I'm not sure we can condition that without knowing that it's the applicant or the applicant's people attending his site who've damaged it.
Well, I can only advise you really on the test for conditions, and one of them, it does have to be reasonable. So I suppose we have to know, is it reasonable to ask the applicant to pay for repairs that I think have been carried out at public expense anyway, and that you have to have evidence in front of you that it is the super dairy vehicles that have caused that damage, of course.
It is related to the application, isn't it, that role?
So that's that one, and then what was it, a pre-commencement condition? I think the same argument, just if it's reasonable. So it has to be necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development that's been permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other respects. So if it doesn't meet those conditions, then it's likely to fail, I would think, or be open to challenge.
Just on this point.
Go to Councillor Brown.
Just on this point, clearly it would be inappropriate in law to suggest that somebody repaired something that there was no evidence that actually damaged. Is it inappropriate in law to ask for a condition that somebody that heavily uses a bridge contributes routinely to the maintenance of that bridge? Is that something we can legally do?
Again, I can only advise you on the tests, so it would be something that we'd have to discuss, but I wouldn't have thought that would meet the tests. Perhaps planning officer would like to.
It looks to me that you're creating a road toll or a bridge toll that only one party has to pay, and I don't think we can do that. I'll pass over to the officer.
Yeah, it would not be feasible. You're talking about a public highway in terms of this, and we have no evidence to be able to put a condition on that. It would not meet any of the tests, it would not be reasonable.
Okay.
Okay, can I just say as well, I'm going to come in at this point. We've been told that by increasing the storage facility or the size of the storage wouldn't increase traffic movements. Now, in some circumstances I can see why that would be correct, because unless you're increasing the intensification of actual farming activities, which would mean a combination of more cows eating more food, then once that storage facility has been filled to its maximum, then the amount of storage feed coming out of it and having to be replenished would be exactly the same as it is now, because so there would be an initial possible increase in traffic movements to fill it up, but as I say, unless there's more cows eating more feed, you're not going to be putting more and more feed into this facility. It would just be a temporary increase, I think, in filling the storage unit up, but then it would empty at the same speed that it's emptying now. Does anyone think that that's incorrect?
Sorry, can I just be devil's advocate and put that the other way around? What's to stop the applicant, having got greater storage capacity and therefore the ability to feed more cows, to simply put more cows on the land? Because presumably he wouldn't need a planning consent to put more cows in a field.
The point being, the cows aren't in the field, the cows are kept in sheds, so presumably he would need a separate application for new cattle sheds, so he could place more cattle on the site, but that's not the application that's before us today. So my concern is that some of what we're debating is actually speculation, and we're supposed to decide the merits of the application based on the evidence that's before us. And I don't want to be guilty of speculating on this, so I'm going to pass over to Councillor Brodigan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it does actually say in the application that there will be, highways feel there may be a reduction in the traffic because they'll be able to store more homegrown food. So there's balance of strength in this. And this might sound strange coming from a city-born and bred person, but we don't seem to be talking about the needs of the farmer here. We're talking about the needs of the residents, which I do accept and do acknowledge, but there are also needs of the farmer. Farming has changed and is changing, and it says here that they're moving more and more towards larger industrial type farming, and some of this application is being brought about by changes imposed by the Environment Agency. So if the farmer is going to keep up with modern standards and certainly my green colleagues here, I'm sure, would agree that we need to be having more home-produced and home-grown food to reduce our carbon footprint. So I think we also need to take into account why this application is being brought about and think of also the needs of the farmer. Thank you.
Points of clarification.
Sorry, I'm going to go to Councillor Brown if I may.
No, go first.
Oh, you're okay. Okay.
My understanding from the site visit this morning, Chairman, was that there's an existing concrete apron that's intended being roofed over, keep the weather out. I can see the farmers are sensing that. But it will not lead. You can only, in Craven you can only get a crop grown once every 12 months. And you're unlikely to use it all up and fill it again within the 12 months. So there can't be any more storage now than what there was previously. In future it will be exactly the same that comes in. Not more, maybe a bit less, but certainly not more. Am I right?
Oh, because you invite it in.
I'm going to come to Councillor Brown in a moment, but I am a little naive on these things. Presumably the covering it over is to protect the feed, so that's what they're actually trying to do, is to protect it.
Nothing else.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, firstly, that not all the feed is grown on site. A great deal of it is brought in and from some distance, and therefore, if you increase the storage capacity, you can both increase the volume of cattle. On the issue of the environmental nature of the development, which is not really relevant, but I think it's worth commenting as somebody else has. If you'd been on the site visit, you would have seen 960 cattle lined up, unable to move in an industrial unit. So it is the industrialisation of agriculture. I am very strongly in favour of increasing farming in Britain and increasing it on a sustainable basis. Most of this will be fed grain, which is wheat and maize brought in from off-site, which the obvious extent of land required to grow that. And effectively this is an industrialisation of agriculture which could take place on an industrial estate. There's absolutely nothing here in terms of the way those cattle are fed and the way the silage is removed that couldn't be done in Keighley on an industrial estate. It's been done in an area which was entirely appropriate for natural dairy farming and for the volumes of traffic that generated. But what's been generated here is a completely different nature and has made life hell for the neighbours, has damaged heritage assets that are much valued by local walkers and cyclists. And if we were in a position of judging the overall development, I think the answer would be an overwhelming no. We're not in that position, and we're not left with a common sense. I mean, I think most residents expect councillors to speak up on their behalf, sit here and make a reasonable common sense judgment about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's not actually what we're allowed to do. What we're actually required by the law to do is to sit here and check whether it complies with the rules. And that's why the only thing I think it's reasonable to ask is that we make sure that the information we've got about how many journeys are actually required, we get a proper assessment of whether there is going to be an increase or not in traffic as a use of this increased storage by somebody that's done an expert assessment of it, and an expert assessment of whether the distance that's travelled over these roads is appropriate for this volume of traffic, and whether we can reasonably increase, or if there is any increase. So all I'm asking for is we have the proper facts to enable us to do the job we're supposed to do of following the law in it. I'm not asking for us to go for a straight rejection because I don't like industrialised farming.
I have to, from a personal point of view, I'm still not convinced that a further traffic survey will tell us whether there's going to be a future impact on traffic movements through the locality. I think all it's going to do is tell us how many traffic movements there currently are at the moment. Anything beyond that's purely speculation. And then the other problem that I have, like you, I walked around the site this morning, and I think it's fair to say I was a little surprised by modern farming techniques, if I can put it that way. It's not quite as I remember when I was younger. But we're in danger, possibly, I think, if we're not careful, of conditioning an already lawful use. If we're going back to, well, we want traffic, to highways to condition this, that, and the other, bearing in mind there's already a lawful use occurring on site. They are allowed to use the bridge, they are allowed to use the highway, and I still haven't seen anything to suggest that this will result in more traffic movements.
Can we go to the vote, Chairman, on the deferment?
Sorry, so Councillor Williams, you want to come in?
I do, because I reserve my right to speak, and I haven't done so. The reason why I support the deferral to get another traffic assessment is simply that we've heard from objectors today that they don't actually believe the data that we've been provided with as elected members. And I think that given the month in which it was undertaken, there may well be an issue over the validity or not of the traffic data that we've been given. And whilst I accept that there's no clear evidence before us today that the application is going to make any difference to those vehicle numbers, what I think we do need to understand is the actual accurate vehicle movements in that area, because as the objectors have also raised, there is no detailed condition within the report that we've got before us at the moment as to the extent of the passing place that is proposed. There is no actual detail to that condition, and I think that a deferral to get a proper traffic assessment so that we can actually ensure with any condition in respect of the passing place or passing places that may be required, that we have that information before us. Because if the data is wrong and there is actually much more traffic flow along there, as the parish councils are suggesting, and I'm sorry, but I don't know the area, so I have to listen, and it's my job as a member of this committee to listen to the concerns raised by local residents and their representatives of their parish councils, who must surely know their area much better than somebody who lives 30 odd miles from it. We've heard the local member say that every application that's been brought forward, we've been, the residents that he represents have been assured that there'll be no increase in traffic, and yet he then says that every time that there has been planning consent granted, it has then led to more traffic. So I think when you hear from local residents, we have a duty to be fair to the applicant, but we also have a duty to be fair to those who have to reside next to the applicant's property and the amenity that they have as local residents. And it's for that reason that I think that a deferral today would be sensible, and it's on that basis that I was happy to second a proposal. You will note that I indicated from the outset that I wasn't prepared to second an outright rejection of the application that we have before us today, because I don't believe that there's sufficient evidence before us to enable us to do that, and I think that that would be wholly unreasonable. But I don't think the course of action that's being proposed would be unreasonable under the circumstances, and I think it would meet the concerns expressed today of the residents who have spoken at some length and with some conviction about the issue.
I'm going to let Andrew come in a moment. I'm still not convinced that any road traffic survey can tell us whether there's going to be any increased traffic if we do or don't refuse this application today. It may well come back and say there's much more traffic already using the roads than we realised, But if it comes back with that information, it's still just saying there's more traffic on the road, but there is a lawful use. I think if we're looking at the real crux of the problem is, will it result in more traffic? And do we then have to put additional conditions in to control the increased traffic levels? And I just don't see how that road traffic survey is going to provide us with any of that evidence. But I'm just going to pass over to
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I suppose what I would like to stress is that those deliveries, those vehicle movements are already occurring. The hard standing is being used to store food. Those vehicle movements are already occurring and it's already on a public highway, combined with the other movements from the other farms within that particular area. So irrespective of whether this application was to be refused or not, they've still got a lawful use to use that pad to store food, and then transport that how they need to from that site, which is one of the reasons why potentially that traffic survey is not really going to show anything, because it's already happening, it's existing. So it's not going to show an additional maybe movements in terms of that, because it is an existing use that they're using at the moment. In terms of the passing pace, yes, there is condition 5 which sets out the requirements. You've got a slide on the screen at the moment that sets out some of the details as well. But as part of that, there is the independent stage 2 road safety audit, which is a clear set of regulations that they will need to adhere with. Daniel probably has a bit more information on it than I do. But there are clear regulations that they have to abide by, which would mean that any passing place that is put forward would be acceptable in terms of highway safety. We wouldn't allow anything to go forward that did not meet highway safety standards. I just wanted to clarify that point, Chair.
Councillor Nord.
Thank you, Chair. Right, is there a problem with highway safety? I'd say definitely. Looking at the pictures. I also know from personal experience, I've cycled along that lane very many times. So yes, I'm well aware of the dangers of tractors. Is there going to be increasing highway capacity? Well, you look at the two barns. There were 3 barns, if I call them barns. I'm also calling it a farm, but is this a mega farm? The 3 big barns there, where they're stored, 20 to 30 metres high, and outside it's only 4 or 5 metres high. So if you're going to build a barn with a roof there, it's inevitably going to increase the capacity. I don't see how you can argue against that. So will there be an increase in deliveries and movements? I don't see how you can argue there won't be either. But that's not my main point. My main point will lead from the facts. And I've got a highways officer here, and we can talk accidents and action all day long, but I don't believe that a low number of accidents mean there's a low danger. I think a low number of accidents might mean people perceive that road to not be safe to walk or cycle on. Certainly, I wouldn't recommend. I imagine a new to cycling cyclist would not want to cycle down the side of a tractor. I'm a very experienced cyclist. I've managed to survive a lot of travel. I sometimes decided to ride onto the verge where I think, right, this is not looking good. I know what's happening. I'm getting off the road. Other times I can just slow down and pass a car, and I can see the cars slow down as well, or even a tractor, and I'm happily to go down the side. I'm only in a metre of space, but I feel like in control. But I'm a very experienced cyclist. I'll probably fall off next week, but now I've said that. But I don't believe, I say again, low number of accidents means low danger. And if you just look at the pictures of people living in Gargrave or driving in Gargrave, trying to drive through their village and tell me that these aren't dangerous. So it's just incredible if you see that day to day. So to finish off, I'm deeply worried about the damage to the road and the damage to the bridge. I'd hardly say this is sustainable. I've got a note 10.2, page 24, so I'm going to quickly nip to that if I may, Chair, and it says Local plan policy EC3 states that Craven's rural economy will be supported so they may grow and diversify in a sustainable way. I don't believe this mega farm is sustainable. Commerce. I don't think the damage to the highway and the damage to the bridge is sustainable. It's not been repaired. And then I go back finally to 10.16, Chair, so I'm about to stop. It says MPPF, paragraph 111 at 10.16, says the development should only be prevented or refused if there's an unacceptable impact on highway safety. Well, look at those pictures and you told me that's safe. I don't think it is. Look at the bridge. Why cannot any of us not walk down that towpath or cycle down that towpath right now? We can't because it's blocked off. I peeked over the bridge today and there are blocks of stone and big blocks of stone, and God knows they must be approaching a few hundredweight, I don't know, pushed out by about 2 feet. I think I was talking to my colleague here, there must be a gap in the bridge, there must be 2 walls of the bridge, and while on the inside, I don't know which page, we'll see it, on the outside, looking out on the front page of one of those things, it says, oh, you can see it from the inside, damaged by large vehicles. You can't quite see, but that's been pushed out by about 2 feet. And if that's not safe, why can't I walk or cycle down that towpath? So, is there a problem with highway safety? Massively. Who's causing it? Very likely this farm, but again, legally I'll say we don't know. We know there's a farm, in fact one of the objectors runs a sheep farm. I don't know, fluffy little sheep running around the field, perhaps all day long, but I imagine that at some point they've got to be carted off the farm. So are there lorries causing any problems? I don't know. But we know there are hundreds of journeys by these huge tractors. So if going by NPP paragraph 111, I think that we should prevent or refuse any more development. I don't want to shut the farm down, and like many people here, we want to see farming businesses go on. But there seems to be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. So I'm deeply worried. That's why I would support Councillors Brown and Williams in some sort of analysis, some deferment to analyse what's going on, who's causing the problems.
Just for the record, I'm not a highways officer, but I can see why the road might not be safe. I personally wouldn't walk down there, or let my children walk down there, or let cycle down there or anything like that, because I'd be scared of being squashed. Okay, but what we're looking at doing here, we're looking at retrospectively introducing some kind of punitive conditions to try and fix a problem that is already there. Is that the responsibility of this committee? Can we do that as a committee? I don't know. You would think that we could exercise common sense and right all the wrongs of the world, but what we're being asked to do today is consider the application before us, not look at, well, there's a dangerous problem here, so should we use the planning system in this current planning application to try and improve a problem that's already existing? And I personally feel that that's beyond the powers of this committee to do. So if I could just go, I'm going to go to Councillor Brodigan in a moment, but Councillor Brown, what are you looking for this survey? What information do you want this survey to produce? To what end do you want the survey doing?
Yeah, I think we need to satisfy ourselves that we're not making the situation worse by the application. And I want to understand the baseline of what the situation is in September and what an independent expert makes of whether the road in question is capable of handling the existing level of traffic, and therefore whether it is reasonable to increase the level of traffic, and whether it's reasonable to believe we are increasing the level of traffic.
I think therein lies the problem of the whole application. We don't know, and I don't see how any survey can actually tell us whether we're going to increase or the traffic volumes are going to increase. We can all take an educated guess, but that's all it is, it's an educated guess. I can't see any evidence or any way of gathering evidence to know whether traffic volumes are going to increase, unless the farmers start saying, I'm going to put more cows on there, I'm going to feed them more feed. Councillor Brodigan?
Thank you, Chair. I think you actually said some of the points I was going to make. You know, that this discussion really has focused on the highways issues and not actually on the application itself, because what we should be talking about is whether we're going to grant permission for this storage facility to be erected. If we refuse it, the traffic issues are still going to be there. What we discussed today will make the slightest bit of difference, and at the risk of sounding flippant, if you live in a rural community, walking or cycling can be hazardous with farm traffic. Yeah, I come from a big city where you don't see that sort of traffic, but you do obviously in the countryside. So, you know, if we grant the planning permission, then yeah, it's a position the traffic may increase, but we don't know that yet. So I think we should be focusing on the actual issue about what the application is about. Thank you.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the first instance, I think we're going to vote on the deferral. Kate, can you just clarify for the benefit of everyone in the room what we're voting on?
I think I'd like some wording from the councillors on that actually, on why exactly you're deferring. I think Councillor Brown had a good wording that we could take down.
Yeah, I'm proposing a deferral for an independent assessment of the impact of any additional traffic on the traffic situation at peak season, i.e. autumn.
So just for the avoidance of doubt, what we're asking to vote on is the traffic that comes through at a certain time of year is ordinarily heavier, as opposed to we're trying to speculate on what the traffic volume will be if we approve this application.
I'm basically saying we have no information of the volume of traffic in harvest season, and we need that in order to make a reasonable judgment as to whether any change in the traffic situation, is reasonable.
But therein lies the problem. We don't know if there'll be any change in the traffic situation.
That's for us to decide by vote, isn't it? I mean,
yes, it is. I'm just making that point. So Councillor Brown very eloquently put forward what he's asking us to vote on, and you're seconding that, Councillor Williams. Okay, so
the parish council's objection.
We're just going to let the officer talk to the legal for a moment.
Chair, could we perhaps test the vote before we decide whether there's a legal issue? Because if I lose, then they may not have to have it.
I think I'd like to just defer to legal for a moment, if I should, Councillor Brown. I think that's always a good thing to speak to the solicitors and lawyers.
You did say the cows were unable to move quite in the stairs.
Well, and move more than to
Sorry, we were just discussing the deferral for such a long time because we do have to, as a council, make a decision within a reasonable length of time. So we might not, you possibly can't defer until September next year. I'm sorry, but it's just the way the planning system works that we are obliged as a council to give a decision in a reasonable amount of time, and that wouldn't be. So I'm not sure it's going to work legally. Sorry to put an obstacle in the way.
Chair, I hear the advice. Let's take the vote.
Yeah, take the vote. Okay, so all those in favour? Those against? Okay.
Sorry to be a pain, Chair. Could I, on the main motion?
No, you're not.
Please don't vote on that one. On the main motion, just 2 points. Firstly, could we condition that it can only be used for storage and cannot be used for housing cattle? And could we condition that highways have to agree the safe access arrangements? Those two things I don't think are clear in the conditions. And I think
Are you happy with the passing point arrangements?
I'm suggesting that it is up to Highways and the applicant to make sure that I'm asking for a condition which is not there's one passing point, that the condition is that Highways signs it off as a safe access route.
We've done that already.
Right. Just in terms of the passing place, it would be subject to a 278 agreement. So whatever was designed would have to be agreed by us as the highway authority before it could be implemented. With regard to other passing places, we can't condition the requirement to provide passing places on land that they do not own. So they have to have land ownership, and they do own the land at the side of the bridge where the passing place is proposed, so we can condition that. We can't condition passing places elsewhere on the network because they don't own the land.
We can't make it safe any distance away. Okay. Tells me a lot.
Councillor Williams.
I just have one question on regards to the conditions and the storage facility, which is that we've heard that you can't keep more cattle without the need for more sheds at this location. Can I be clear that we're not setting the precedent today that by potentially increasing the storage capacity that we are not then predetermining a future application coming forward to have more cattle there by virtue of the fact that we've already increased the storage capacity, and that therefore it won't lead to any more traffic movements, because the traffic movements are already feeding that existing storage facility.
Through you, Chair. If that was to happen, then we would have to reconsider it as a fresh application. That's not what is in front of members at the moment. It is just the one agricultural building. So if the situation changes moving forward, it will be reassessed.
So just on that point, if there was a fresh application to go in to increase the size of the cattle sheds or put additional cattle sheds, all of these highway concerns could then legitimately be considered at that point, as opposed to what I'm scared is that we're retrospectively imposing planning or highways conditions on a lawful use. So we do have that assurance that at that stage, if they wanted an additional 500 cattle there, we could legitimately say, well, that's going to increase the volume of traffic on this highway, and do we think that that's reasonable or not? That's what we're saying.
We would reconsider it, yeah.
They just used a different building, Chairman. Tying yourselves up.
Are they entitled to do that without a separate plan application?
There are certain things that you cannot do in terms of livestock. You're not allowed to have them in terms of certain distances from what we call protected houses, which is people that are not related to agricultural uses. So you tend to have a separation. Whether they would, I suppose the realistic use is that the buildings that house the cows at the moment are built for that particular purpose. It would be incredibly difficult for them to reuse another building on that site because they're not built for that particular purpose. So I don't see how that would happen in terms of that, if they could do it without coming through the planning process to get the permission for that particular build, because it would be built for that particular purpose. So it'd have to have the electrics in, it'd have to have everything in that was necessary for it.
Councillor,
I think they've given this application a good debate, Chairman. There is great concerns about the traffic movement and the damage, etc., that's been done. But the application in front of us is to cover in a concrete apron for storage of feed. And that's what we should be looking at. I think it's too late in the day to start looking at other issues. I would have liked to have seen some contribution for repairs, but we're told we can't do that. So I will move the recommendation, Chairman of Officers. Thank you.
Just quickly, Jack, would you accept the idea of conditioning it that it is solely for storage use?
No. I won't do that because there is other options. That I think there's another 3 or 4 buildings there that they could put cattle in if they so wished and retain that. Yeah, I think we, I think we've got to accept that this is for storage. They need storage for the amount of cattle that they've got on that farm and the production of milk. They need sufficient storage space. So if they wanted to put another building up for cattle, I think they would have come forward with an application. So I won't accept it as a condition. But someone else make change.
That's fine.
Councillor Brodie.
I'll second that motion.
So the voting is just the application, I think, is subject to the conditions and the officers.
Additional conditions.
And the additional conditions.
Yes, sorry.
So just to be clear, you're voting to approve the proposal as per the officer's report, subject to the additional condition.
No, the additional condition was not accepted.
Yeah. There is an additional condition.
Sorry.
It says a scheme for the provision of solar panels, including details of appearance, shall be submitted to and approved in accordance with the local planning authority.
Okay, thank you.
I'll agree with that one.
Yeah, I'll agree with that one, yeah. That was one debate we didn't have to have, thank you.
So is that clear what we're voting on?
Okay, so all those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried, thank you. I'm going to pause for 5 minutes because we've had a long lengthy debate, and just for comfort breaking, those that may wish to leave the room can do so. Thank you very much. So if we could move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, and I'll hand over to Andrea again for that.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so this application before members relates to the development of an allocated site in the Craven local plan for housing in Skipton. The proposal has received just 12 objections as detailed within the report. There is also a late update to the report regarding the wording of the affordable housing mix in Table 1 of the report, and also there was an error in the numbering of the proposed coloured layout plan. Just to give some context in this application has come before members because the actual site itself is owned by the council. They are currently in the process of selling it to the applicant, and the signing of the legal agreement is at quite an advanced stage in terms of this. The application, as I mentioned previously, has been before the planning committee previously and had a resolution for approval. Just to give some context in terms of what you might see different from the previous scheme that was before members compared to this one. And the key changes in terms of this one really are the location of the open space that's being proposed in terms of it, and the actual provision of that. The red outline remains the same. The access to the site of Airedale remains the same. The density to the site remains the same. The internal layout, there is slightly minor changes, but they are only minor changes in terms of that. The application does provide the 30% affordable in terms of that, so there's no change in terms of the proposal. It does form one half of the allocated site, and it extends approximately 2.48 hectares, I should say, and it is located to the southeast of Otley Road. So this is just an aerial shot of the site, and as we can see, I'll just get my highlighter. We've got the residential area in this area. We've got the railway line running through here, so it's a protected railway line. You've also got a bank of trees along through here outside of the site. This is also the existing residential element along here, and this is the site here. So what we've got here is, this is going to be the main access into the site off through the existing estate. You can also see the existing footpath on the aerial shot. Now this is to be retained and would be enhanced. Similarly, the dry stone wall that is located down here, which forms a boundary to the site, would also be repaired and be retained. Now, some of you all attended the site visit this morning will notice that the site does slope away quite significantly in terms of northwards, and it also lies within flood zone 1, except for a small area along this boundary along here, but there are no houses proposed within that area. Looking at the actual proposed site plan we've got here, mentioned within the report paragraph 10.6 and 10.7, the development of this site, as I mentioned right at the beginning, is a former council site sort of thing, and as in the proposal had a resolution to approve subject to the signing of a legal agreement. Now, the reason that that didn't go ahead was unfortunately that the partnership that the council was in with the developer fell away, which is why we have the application before us today. As mentioned at the right at the beginning, there are a couple of key differences between this. Most of those differences are in terms of minor changes to the internal configuration that we've got here. Set out within the report is how the application actually accords with policy SP5 in terms of the proposal, and yes, the proposal does accord with the policy requirements of SP5. So looking at the proposal that we've got, this is showing the access of the existing estate roads into the site. This area here, and I have a better up-close slide as we go through it, is where the proposed open space is to be. The footpath will follow back through and go and continue underneath the existing railway bridge under there. But then it will also be contained and repaired and extended into this area here. There will also be additional planting within this area, so it makes it a nice amenity space within the site as well. This is also the location of the attenuation tank, which has been agreed with the local flood authority in terms of its acceptability for dealing with surface water throughout the site. Towards the bottom end of the site, the southern end, there is also another kind of like a dog walking area in terms of this, with additional tree planting in this area here. There is also, as you can see, there are green buffers around the site as well, and this is really to protect, not only to give it a nice open green feel, but also to protect the amenity of the neighbouring properties throughout the site. Now, the dwellings have been arranged so they have frontages onto the roads and back to back, so there's good natural surveillance between the properties. They're also nicely spaced out within the site, so each property has a nice and good level of amenity space. There is also good separation distances between the existing properties outside of the site and those proposed within the site. So none of those on either the existing or the proposed would experience any unacceptable loss of privacy. Now, due to the topography of the site, there will be 2-storey dwellings and 3-storey dwellings within the site, and that is reflective of dwellings that are quite adjacent to the site in this area here. Now, the dwellings themselves will be constructed using natural stone under a slate roof, and again this will relate and make a high quality proposal moving forward. On this slide as well, it does actually indicate that the affordable housing has been pepper potted through the site. We've got some here and up through here and round through here. This has been agreed with the Strategic Housing Officer, and they're satisfied that the mix being proposed is acceptable, and that would also be secured in the legal agreement. In terms of the density does accord with the requirements of the local plan in terms of it moving forward, and also the mix is deemed to be acceptable considering the site constraints. This is just a couple of slides now. The dwellings themselves, there's quite a wide variety of different styles of properties within the site. This is deemed to give it quite a nice attractive feel as you walk through the site. As I say, it will be constructed using high quality materials. This is a slide here just to show what some of those materials would be. Those that attended the site visit this morning will have seen a similar development just further up off Moorview Way, which could use similar materials in terms of that. This is just to give an indication of some of the street view, or a street view in terms of that. So this is at the bottom end of the site, and then just to show the difference in terms of the levels throughout the site, and this is here is one of the existing dwellings in terms of that. So as mentioned, on some of the levels they will actually look like 2 stories, but due to the changes in levels on the other side they would look as 3 stories. and this is a mixture throughout the site, but it does mean that the roof levels do follow quite nicely, so none stand out higher than any of the others. The proposal in terms of sustainability does set out how it will meet the requirements of EMV 3 in terms of paragraph 10.74, and that's about the fact that the buildings will be highly insulated, they're going to be using sustainable materials, energy efficient fittings, including also the fitting of electric charging points and also solar points as well, solar panels. There's also going to be looking in terms of the details provided that the dwellings would outperform the carbon emission levels as set out in Part L of the building regulations by about approximately 10%. So again, that's considered that the proposal meets that requirement of the policy in terms of sustainability. In terms of the slide that we've got in front of you, excuse me, this is just to show the level of soft landscaping that is being proposed. So in this area here, as mentioned previously, we've got the attenuation tank, but we've got also some planting, some trees, a water meadow, etc. through there. You've also then got obviously the green garden areas, but you've also got street trees throughout the site as well, to soften up and provide another biodiversity gain in terms of the site. And also in the open spaces and walking area, there are additional planting. The application itself in terms of biodiversity does exceed the mandatory 10% that's been put forward, and the Council's Ecological Officer has confirmed that the details are acceptable, and these are also being secured within the legal agreement. This is just a quick closer slide in terms of the proposed open space on the site. Again, the requirements of the open space have been conducted and provided in accordance with the requirements of the open space officer. Also, in addition to this, there is an off-site contribution that is required, and again, this is being secured in the legal agreement. Some of you who attended the site, I mentioned that there was going to be some site improvements at the top of Airedale Road and Hares Road. At the moment, the existing visibility lines, it's kind of pulled back, so you don't have the best visibility in terms of that. So this op-work would actually pull that visibility lines forward, you get a greater visibility, and that's an improvement in terms of that. So again, that would be secured, we've got that secured by condition, and also it would be in the section 278 in terms of it as well. And again, highways have approved that and have not got any concerns in terms of that works. This is just some images in terms of the top junction. So this is the junction here that would be seeking the improvements to. So you can see where it is really at the moment, and that would pull it out in terms of you've got a better visibility in that end. That's just looking up at the junction in terms of that space there, and then that's just looking down in terms of it. It's important to state that highways have reviewed the application in terms of the highway implications and have not raised any objections in terms of the access to the site, around the site, or the parking provision for both residents and visitors. This is just a couple of slides in terms of what's actually on site for those members that weren't able to attend. So this bit here is the existing footpath that is to be retained and enhanced, and you can just see there's some houses on the brow in terms of that area there. This is near to the entrance that will be proposed, and we're looking down the site. So this is where the railway bank, the bank of trees in this particular area are. Now we're actually in the site as well. So this is the footpath further down into the site and looking up. So again, you can kind of see the differences in the levels that we've got there. And these are some of the houses you can just see on the edges there. And this is a footpath, an image of the footpath just cutting through the bottom of the site, and it would lead out under the railway bridge out onto Otley Road. Again, just a couple of slides in terms of the site. This is further along towards the far end of the site, just looking back and up to where the residential properties on the existing estate. This was just a couple of, we did have some comments reference highways concerns about potential impact in terms of the railway bridge that's out beyond the application site on Shortbank Road, I think is the correct terminology of it. So we just did a quick snapshot of taking some images of particular times of the day. It is acknowledged that at certain times it can get a little bit busier down on this particular road, but it does move quite freely, and that was not a really major concern in terms of that. So in conclusion, the principle of residential on this site has been established through the inclusion of it being in the housing allocation site for the Craven local plan. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of visual impacts and would not give rise to any amenity or flooding issues. Biodiversity and sustainability benefits would be provided, as well as the provision of policy accordance affordable provision on site and also an open space off-site contribution. Regarding the highway impacts, the traffic impacts of the proposal have been assessed both through the local plan process and as part of this planning application by the Highways Officer. Following the review, the Highways Authority are satisfied that the impact of the proposal will not have a detrimental impact on the existing highway network and have not recommended any objections to the proposal. As mentioned at the beginning, the application is subject to conditions and the signing of the legal agreement and is recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Andrea. Does anyone have any questions for the case officers? Councillor Brown, then Councillor Ireton.
Just one really. The off-site contributions to sort of things like, did we explore the sewage implications, the doctors' implications? I know we explored the education, and I know we've done the open space. I just wondered about pressure on sewage system, because we keep passing these housing estates and there's still only one sewage farm in Skipton, and unless we ask for some kind of contribution, you know, I just wondered whether we asked for that and what the situation was with doctors' surgeries as well.
Yeah, because the sewage companies are private companies, they fund their own improvements in terms of that. So any developer has a right to connect, but should there be an instance of where they need to improve or whatever, that will come down to them as them being a private company. And as I mentioned, they've responded to this application and not raised any objections in terms of capacity as it stands at this moment in time.
Always bloody do, don't they?
Thank you, Chairman. I question about the affordable housing, and I see at 715 there's a 113,000 open space payment. Is this site viable of these payments, as we've had COVID and we've had increasing materials, as we see in our next application that's been assessed? So how does that fit with this application? And another question was, at 719 I see the Yorkshire Dales have responded. Where is the boundary for the Yorkshire Dales, and why were they consulted?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the viability, all I can say that this application comes forward to you today, it is a viable option, it is a viable development in terms of that. Regarding the other application, which we'll go into in more detail, the two sites themselves are not really comparable in terms of what the constraints are in that one compared to this one, which may have an impact in terms of the viability. But yes, this site is viable moving forward. In terms of the consultation with the Yorkshire Dales?
Yorkshire
It's been a long day.
Yorkshire Dales National Park.
Exactly. It is part of the design principles for the policy. They are quite away, and there is a bit of a distance away from them, but it was written into the policy that we had to make sure that whatever development we did didn't result in any visual harm to the Yorkshire Dales sort of thing. So out of courtesy, we just consult with them.
You're too kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the case officers? If not, we will move over to our speakers. So we have two speakers. We have Eric Jackin, is that correct?
Yes.
Jacquin. Okay. Followed by Sarah Barraclough. So Mr. Jacquin will be speaking as an objector, and Sarah Barraclough will be speaking for the applicant Skipton Properties. So you have 3 minutes to speak from when you turn your microphone on and start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. members, officers. My name is Eric Jacquin. I was a Crane District Councillor who represented East Ward for over 20 years. The site of this application is grazing land inherited by North Yorkshire Council, and the land was to be sold by the council to the developer only if the development gained planning consent. The application was validated on the 9th of August. Consultees and neighbours then had 21 days to comment to the planning department. You mentioned that there were only 12 objectors. Perhaps that's because after the consultation deadline had passed, the developer sent in a construction management plan, and the local planning authority chose not to reconsult, so the statutory and neighbourly consultees didn't have the chance to comment. The construction management plan indicated that construction vehicles should avoid Skipton town centre wherever possible and should approach Skipton along Otley Road, which is up on the left-hand side of the plan, into Shorebank Road at the roundabout at the bottom of Brougham Street, and up under the railway bridge where the narrow carriageway is just short of Hers Road, and then turning left up Hers Road into Airedale Avenue to reach the site. Who's going to monitor these traffic movements? Will it be the police, North Yorkshire Trading Standards, or planning enforcement? The route means that vehicles from 366 houses in the urban area will follow the same route as construction vehicles for the whole time of the works. To avoid this part of the urban area, a temporary haul road from Otley Road could be built under the railway underpass. Most of that shore length is also in North Yorkshire Council's ownership, which would save about a mile on each and every traffic movement associated with the works. I urged the Planning Committee to refuse or at least defer the application so that discussions between North Yorkshire Council and neighbouring interested parties can come to a satisfactory conclusion, especially for the residents of over the 360 houses who didn't get a chance to comment on the construction vehicle access route when the application was validated. If the Planning Committee refused the application, the sale of the site will not go ahead. An alternative temporary haul road is acceptable. I feel the reduction in council tax for the 15 affected houses at the eastern end of Otley Road should be given. This expenditure could be completely avoided if a temporary haul road directly off Otley Road, perhaps to the east side of the Quarry Line Railway Bridge, became the only vehicular access to the site. Members, it's your decision to determine whether the site access for the construction follows the existing road or shortens each movement by about 1 mile for the duration of the works, which will be much welcomed by the residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, could I ask Sarah Barraclough to come forward now, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Barraclough, Managing Director of Skipton Properties. We are a family-run, second-generation, local award-winning house builder. Some of you may know our first development was in Skipton, built in the late 1980s, and since then we have gone on to build over 400 homes in the town in which I live. We have a proven track record of building very high quality, well-designed, sustainable homes in North Yorkshire over the last 38 years. Most recently, we have completed 98 homes at the Alders just up the road from this site. The planning officer's recommendation for approval is very welcome. The committee report provides a robust assessment of the planning merits of this proposal and a clear rationale for the grant of planning permission. Our development will provide 53 new homes ranging from 1 bedroom to 4 bedrooms designed in a traditional style using locally sourced high quality materials. As an accredited carbon neutral developer, we are committed to building sustainable homes. We target the most energy efficient ratings in all of our developments, incorporating a range of energy efficiency, renewable features such as including solar panels and electric vehicle charging points. 30% of the homes we will deliver will be affordable in accordance with the Council's policy. These will include a range of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes located across the site, as agreed with the housing officer. Our scheme provides near to 9,000 square metres of public open space, green corridors and a play space area, landscaping, planting with over 100 new trees. Our application exceeds the minimum requirements of biodiversity net gain, with a 19% gain in habitat units delivered on the site. In addition, we will be contributing to over £100,000 to the open space of the local area. Our scheme includes a comprehensive drainage and flood management infrastructure, including sustainable urban drainage features which have been accepted by the Flood Authority and Yorkshire Water. Our development will provide cycle and car parking in accordance with current policy. The application has been reviewed thoroughly by the Highways Officer, who confirms it is fully acceptable. We look forward to working with the Highways Authority to provide the agreed improvements at Airedale Avenue and Hurst Road Junction. We are absolutely committed to delivering the new homes on this allocated site as soon as possible. Should you approve our application, we aim to start work early next year, with the aim being that some new homes would be available for sale before the end of 2025. The committee report confirms that our application is fully in accordance with development plan and will provide a sustainable development. I therefore respectfully ask that the committee approve our application in accordance with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to go to Councillor Ireton first, to Councillor Heatherton.
It is Councillor Heatherton, the ward member.
Local member.
Yeah. I shall give way to that.
Sorry, you're quite right. I can go to you first.
Yeah.
But they change my division so often, like. I'm confused. Yes, I am the local member, and I have put a few notes down. If it's good enough for members of Parliament on their debates, it's good enough for me. This is a designated housing site in our local plan. In the dying days of Craven District Council, Craven District Planning Committee voted to approve a very similar application for residential development on this site. Our decision that day related to the land use of the site, and we weren't really concerned about the merits of ownership. We are here to discuss land use, not ownership. However, for some reasons unknown to myself, the decision notice was not issued. Reading the officer's report today, it appears all relevant planning policies are reasonably satisfied. Local people can accept the development for housing, but have serious concerns on the access up Shortbank Road, up Hurst Road, and then down Airedale Avenue. However, further development on this segment of Skipton must have a new access directly onto the A65. Unless that comes forward, sir, then all hell will break loose in that area. The construction of a works traffic temporary route, that is entirely sensible. There will be many days when wagons cannot get up and down the road. Vehicles parked on either side. It's difficult for a car to get through, never mind a heavy goods vehicle. So that temporary route, wherever it goes, unless you put it further up and it serves for the next development, it's already there, then that suggestion from Mr. Jacquin deserves serious consideration. There's a lot of sense in what he says on that. I, unfortunately, having fought this development for a big part of my life, I think I'm going to have to throw a towel in today.
I'm going to go to Councillor Ireton and Councillor Williams.
Yeah, this as a planning permission, I don't know why Craven District Council dragged its feet and didn't get it signed at the time. There must have been something behind it. Regarding the temporary route. I don't know the area that well. I would say, you know, the land ownership may not be in the developer's hands to achieve that. So therefore, I don't think we should be conditioning that. I do agree that there eventually will be a better route straight onto Ockley Road from the remainder of that land, and possibly that should have been done years ago. But we, again, like the dairy farm, we are where we are. So with that, Chairman, I will move the recommendation with the conditions attached. Yeah.
Councillor Williams and then Councillor Brown.
I just want to ask a procedural point in respect of the proposed construction access, because I don't think we could necessarily clarify whether it's feasible or not today. But I hear the concern, and I hear the concern of the local member, and I just wonder whether it is something that we should actually be deferring this consideration today to get a formal response on, or can the officers actually give a formal response as to whether that route is possible? Because I agree with Councillor Art and indeed probably Councillor Hazeltine in terms of I have no issue at all with the housing development at all. Fully support it. It's in accordance with all the policies. It's simply this condition over the access route, which there is clearly some local concern about, and I think it would be helpful if we can minimise the impact that the works will have on local residents. And if there is a means to do that, then I think we should be ensuring that it's achieved. But I don't know the area well enough to be able to directly comment, but I hear the concern of the local member, who I have great respect for, in knowing his patch, whichever area of Skipton it currently is.
Just on that same front, I think we heard from Mr Jacquin that some of the temporary access was in North Yorkshire's control, but is there a suggestion that some of it is outside of our control? In which case, if it's outside of our control, can we condition it? If
we couldn't condition it, then the applicant can bring forward a proposal.
There's two things. There's an access that runs across. There's a bridge over a river. I've not seen the bridge, but just looking at the Google Street View, it looks substandard and not sufficient to take the weight of construction vehicles, so you would either have to replace or strengthen the bridge. It's not highway, so it would be in a landowner's control, so they would need landowner's permission to be able to use it. And there's potentially concerns over the bridge itself carrying the railway in terms of its width and structural integrity, so there'd have to be a full structural assessment of that. So I think, based on the fact that it's not highway and there are other things that would be required to improve the access road, I don't know what the exact planning position would be, but from a highways perspective, we can't ask for it.
In which case I'm prepared to second Councillor Arden's proposal.
Councillor Brown? Nothing further to add. Okay. Anybody else want to make any further comments? Councillor Norman.
Just one concern about where are the workers going to park. Is there been some kind of provision for that? I don't see anything in the report. There'll be a lot of workers at this site, probably driving up to work to turn up work. And it's quite a busy residential, busy residential area. We drove up there today. I'm worried about the trucks getting up there. Obviously haven't done for the Alders, but is only thought to give to where they will park. But because of the inconvenience to residents at the moment.
Yep, if I can direct you to condition number 10.
Sorry, assuming they don't cycle or walk there. hopefully or take the bus. Or take the bus, which obviously is our preference.
Exactly.
Active travel.
I'd like to see them cycling there with all their building equipment. Yeah, if I can direct you to condition number 10, which is the construction management plan, that covers about what the requirements are for the parking of contractors and site operatives and visitors to the site. So it will be managed in terms of part of the construction management, which will obviously be agreed with highways in terms of its acceptability. So it is controlled within the condition.
Thank you. I knew I missed it.
Anyone else? Okay, so just bear with me a second. Did we have an additional condition? Yeah.
It's just all it is the plan reference number. And just an update to the actual yeah, a couple well, that's forming part of the legal thing.
Okay. Right, so what we're being asked to do is to vote on the officer's recommendation that planning permission be granted, subject to the conditions and the signing of the legal agreement. Okay, all those in favour? Sorry. Can we carry on?
This is and a draft section 106 being agreed.
And a draft section 106 being agreed.
With the terms. Shall I read it out?
Do you want to do that and then we'll go again? Is that all right?
Sorry about that. That planning permission be granted subject to conditions and a draft section 106 being agreed with terms as detailed in table 1 to secure affordable housing provision, off-site works, off-site open space provision, biodiversity net gain enhancements and long-term monitoring.
Okay, we'll go again. All those in favour? Any objections? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you.
I'm sure Ren will be very pleased.
How's it burnt?
When that gets out, I'll get leached.
Hopefully.
I didn't want to
it's fine for me to give my road a couple of trucks all day. What they say is, just pay 50,000.
My daughter's a really protected to the job.
But I generally
The chaplain's had all that, Tricia gone out.
I think that was one
Oh, that was Stuart Mills. He's Harrogate team manager.
Yeah. I hope it was doing some work then.
Right then, thank you everyone. If we could move on to agenda item 7, which I think is the last bit of substantive business today. So I will pass over to the case officer to introduce his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a scheme for 11 dwellings, and as some former Craven members will remember, this has been before the former council twice before. The site is west of Burton and Lonsdale on allocated site reference BU0112. The site is within the setting of the Castle Hill Scheduled Monument, within the conservation area and within the setting of a number of listed buildings. The site on the slide on screen is in blue, conservation area is the brown line around it, and the listed buildings are in pink. From the aerial slide, the site is on the western part of the allocation, the school is on the remainder. From the layout, there will be a crescent of dwellings around an area of green space and 2 dwellings adjacent to it. And as that slide highlights, the former school access from the adjacent lane will be closed, as was required by the resolution of the former Craven District Council. As the route plan shows, there are good opportunities for south and east facing solar photovoltaic panels. As this slide shows, the scheme would incorporate sustainable drainage, including hydraulic brakes, attenuation, storage tank and soakaways. This slide shows the revised access arrangements the former council resolved to approve last year, those being on the right. That slide is just a historical context to show what happened at school before drop-off time when it was in operation. This slide shows the site in the context of the scheduled monument adjacent to it. This is a view from the opposite side of the A687 towards the site and the access. And looking towards the access, which is well screened in this public, the site is well screened in this public view. This is a shot of the access point on the left, looking towards the A687. And from the A687, looking at the listed school. And from within the other part of the allocated site. This is a view west along the southern boundary, listed school on the right, application site to the left. And that's a view east along the southern boundary. And again, just to highlight, that's the access point that would be closed off. A view north-east across the site. And northwest across the site. That's the western boundary with an existing dwelling. And broadly from that point, a view east across the site. And finally the elevations of plots 1 to 4. Five to 9. And 10 and 11. There's just one update to the report. I set out in the late information. There's a further objection received expressing disappointment for lack of affordable housing and highlighting opportunities for renewable energy generation. The late information sheet has revised wording of recommended condition 16 to ensure a solar photovoltaic scheme is implemented. As the report before you advises, the proposal is acceptable in principle and the identified less than substantial heritage harm would be outweighed by the social and economic and environmental benefits of the scheme as set out at 11.4. Having considered the objections received, officers advise, and as the former council determined twice before, there will be no unacceptable harm to highway safety, character and appearance, living conditions, ecology or flood risk and drainage considerations. Subject to the recommended conditions, the scheme will deliver a net gain in biodiversity and solar photovoltaics. Those are all neutral considerations. However, and the reason why the case is back to the new council's planning committee is that following the submission of viability report and independent appraisal on behalf of the council, it is no longer proposed to deliver affordable housing or public open space obligations because the scheme would not be viable with them. Now, whilst the Craig Local Plan's housing policy H2D and the Affordable Housing SPD allow for exceptions such as this, where demonstrated in exceptional circumstances, that a scheme is unviable with affordable housing contributions, policy INF3 does not. And so in the absence of a contribution for off-site public open space, there would be policy conflict there and conflict with the green infrastructure and biodiversity supplementary planning document. However, the weight we would advise members give to this conflict should be reduced by the good accessibility of the site to the public right-of-way network, which runs along the southern boundary, and the on-site provision of an area of green space. And in the overall planning balance, whilst clearly very disappointing, especially given the work officers did following the committee's request at the last Craven meeting to discuss public open space projects in the locality, we advise that significant weight should be given to the evidence of viability and the independent appraisal in the absence of any evidence to the contrary. Were members to agree, we feel that the social, economic and environmental benefits would outweigh the conflict with policy INF3. Clearly the site is allocated and as such it remains an important component of the local housing land supply, which is a consideration that weighs heavily in favour. Approval is therefore recommended subject to the conditions listed with the amendments to condition 16. However, because the proposal is for only part of the allocated site, as set out in Table 1, Section 106 agreement is also recommended to require viability is revisited and reviewed if further housing proposals come forward on the balance of the allocated site and the applicant is agreeable to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question in terms of the Section 106 agreement? So I understand what triggers the review, saying is if a phase 2 application comes in, is that correct?
That's exactly right, Chair.
What would happen if the land in phase 2 ceased to be in the applicant's ownership?
My understanding it would bind successors in title, and if someone was to acquire that other half, well, just less than half of the allocated site, I expect that will be a matter that will be factored into the negotiations on the asking price for the sale of the land, or at least there'll be some caveats for a future purchaser in that they would have to say, hey, there's a 106 on this land. If I'm going to come forward with housing on this half, I'm going to have to go through this viability review mechanism. That might say that there is a contribution payable on open space and or affordable housing, and so that should be considered. But it would find successors in title check.
But would that review process take into account the total profitability of phase 1 and phase 2 combined, even if phase 2 may cease to be in the ownership of somebody else?
It would, Chair. That would be the intention and operation of the review mechanism.
Councillor Heseltine. Councillor Ireton. It's been a long day. I'm to Councillor Heseltine. I'm talking to Councillor Heseltine.
Yeah. Could you show us the plan with the blue line round it? There should be blue line of ownership, shouldn't there?
That one.
That's the one, isn't it? And these buildings here, these are the old school and the schoolhouse. Yeah. Surely this application should be coming forward as a one unit. I know it's not, and we've got to look at what's in front of us. I'm not going to get into debate on it now. It's a question for the blue line. And I shall come back, Chairman.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Firstly, the housing mix. What's the housing mix on this? How many, 3, 4, etc.? That's the first question.
Chairman, we've got 6 2-bed and 5 3-bed, and the former Craven District Council, twice before, having regard to the strategic housing market assessment, felt that was an appropriate mix in this location and acceptable.
So I'll need to work out the percentages in a second, but I'm not sure that complies. Second question is, we approved this one, what, 3 years ago or 4 years ago? Was it 4 years ago? When we last approved it, what's the date we last approved it?
2021 and then 2023.
Okay, so what's happened to house prices since 2023?
They've changed.
In which direction have they changed?
3.7% increase according to the Nationwide yesterday over the last 12 months.
That's just the last 12 months. I'll just leave that question hanging then.
Any other questions for the officers at this time? No, I don't think we have any speakers in respect to this application. So if we move straight on to the debate, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just let's start out by spelling out where I've been on this previously, so it's absolutely clear that I've got an open mind. I've twice voted for this. Yeah, this is, I think, an appropriate scheme when it includes affordable housing and when it provides us with the appropriate mix of housing. I cannot understand how it is possible for the previous application to be on the steep side with drainage issues and access issues and payment of quite a large amount of money to acquire the site, and it can deliver 30% affordable and an off-site contribution. And this one was assessed by us, was viable prior to COVID at lower house prices, and has suddenly come back as being not viable. And to me, that it not being viable is a major material factor. If we cannot deliver us affordable housing, then a major part of the game goes, because the mix isn't exactly matching our policy. We get no affordable housing, we get harm to a heritage asset, we get local plan policy INF3 and green infrastructure biodiversity SPD can't be met. We get difficult sight lines and speeding traffic. I was previously convinced that the gains outweighed the losses. I no longer am. I'm going to vote against it and propose rejection. So I formally move rejection.
Anybody else wish to speak?
To test the water, I'll second that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed that this application isn't coming forward before the planning authority as a unit. It's piecemeal development as this. We've got the 11 houses on the land, on the playing fields, etc. We've got the actual building, the listed building, so forth, which is not going to be a facility for education, otherwise it would have been built by now. And what should be in front of us is an application for that blue line site. I know we've got the assessment on the affordability, etc. But I still maintain that we should be seeing the full application, not piecemeal. That's not good planning.
Councillor Brodigan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with what's been said by Councillor Ayrton and also Councillor Brown. And I think we're increasingly seeing these small developments coming forward where they say it's unviable to have affordable housing. And I think we could be setting a precedence here where large plots of land could be broken up into small sets of development, and so each small development could be deemed to be unviable to have affordable housing. So I'm inclined to agree that it should be part of a bigger, that the whole piece of land, as Councillor Ayrton pointed out, should be included in this, because it's already alluded to that in here, that it would be viable if that other piece of land came forward. So I would agree with what's been said, and also I think it should be rejected. Thank you.
I don't disagree with the kind of the general gist of disappointment that's going around the room at the moment. My concern is, I think if we look at the previous application we've been looking at, that was on a phase 1 and a phase 2 basis, as on lots of sites, whether they be big or large, and applicants are entitled to submit phase 1 or phase 2 applications for different sites. I am concerned that things like this may be a mechanism to, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, but getting round section 106 contributions or developing a full site, because as I alluded to earlier, it would be it would not be unheard of for the site owner to flip a site on to another developer, and that developer would then say, well, the site owner would only sell us at X amount, we're going to do our own financial viability test, and once again, it's not financially viable if we make a affordable housing provision. However, I'm not convinced that in itself is unlawful or a basis for rejecting an application. Even though many of us around here might want to do that, I'm not convinced we can. I'm going to go to Councillor Nolan and then Councillor Brown.
Could I just have clarification, Chairman? You said the previous site.
Sorry, we were talking about an application at Airedale Avenue, weren't we? We know there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. And I think what you said is this would be a phase 1 and phase 2 development.
I thought the Airedale Avenue was one application. Where do you get your phase 1 and phase 2?
Well, it's a separate ownership.
Yeah, what you've got when you look at the allocated site, the actual allocated site is a bigger site area. So what we had today was the first phase of it, and then there's a second phase coming through, and it's into 2 separate ownerships in terms of that. That's why we class it as a phase 1 and a phase 2 coming forward.
They're not phases. They are not phases. They're separate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what we passed today was one application in council-owned land. Yeah. There may be land that comes forward, next door with land will come forward in different ownership. Different developer may have it. It's not a phased application in that one. This is phased. I mean, so you know, it's one unit, and it should come before us as a planning application as one unit. If it assessed then that there's no affordable housing, no open space, fine. But let's see the full picture of what's going to happen on that site.
Do we have a separate application that's being submitted for the rest of this site? So at that stage, until that stage, we can't say whether it's, you know, a phase 2 application, because there is no application.
Well, this one we can't. But the land is in the ownership. He's not going to leave a listed building. It's a listed structure.
But there's no obligation on the applicant, as far as I can see, to bring in to put any application in for the rest of the site. So what we're suggesting to the owner is telling him what to do in respect of his land and his applications. I'm not sure that we can do that. I'm not sure we can make a decision based on the fact that he's chosen only to put part of the site forward for development.
Perhaps could refuse it on that, Chairman.
Can we?
I don't know. To take that
no part of my proposal is to do that. So my proposal is not to actually do what you just said.
Just refuse it.
Well, I'm going to...
Yeah, Joe, it's a very difficult decision for members to make. It's it's very disappointing that the scheme can't stand to deliver affordable housing on public open space contributions, but I think members need to look at what's before you. The former council granted permission on the other part of the site for a care and education use, a C2, and that's been partially implemented. Just going back to the previous case, I would stress it's each case on its merits having regard to the facts and circumstances and the evidence submitted. The previous site was greenfield, it was larger, and the considerations were different. It's a matter of weight for the committee, a matter for the committee to determine what weight it gives to the evidence of viability and the identified policy conflicts. But my concern would be that because we've got a viability report prepared by a suitably qualified professional, because the council's own independent assessor, who's also suitably qualified, agrees with that and finds that the profit level is so low, way below the normally accepted 17.5% minimum, coming out at 5.9%, that the scheme is not viable on this part of the site with the obligations sought. My concern would be, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, what might be submitted in the event of an appeal. But of course, that's just we have no evidence to the contrary as officers.
Councillor Brown, you've got your fist raised like you're going to find out.
I think actually David was before me, so I just want to answer it. You go for
talk about the different phases, then, that if it was, even if on the previous one we considered, those phases were large, there were 25, 30 homes, so it's difficult to avoid any question about whether there should be a contribution and how many affordable homes. So it's difficult. But breaking it up into 11 and a 10 or 11 and a 9, then we're talking about piecemeal building, aren't we? So, contributions to the community through sports or medical, social, whatever, they're dropped. I can't believe that building 11 houses, you haven't got a little bit spare to contribute to the community. And I think there's a responsibility there to contribute something to the community, that you're building 11 houses. I'm not a developer, I'm not a builder, but I really find it difficult to imagine that somebody's going to build 11 market homes in North Yorkshire and not turn a profit. I think the phase argument drops away. I'm very concerned, I share all my colleagues' concerned about this piecemeal development, and I move to the vote, to be honest.
Could I clarify the reasons? Because no part of my reason is to challenge the auditor's assessment of the affordability. I haven't done that at any point. My reason is, firstly, an existing permission exists that they can build to, that requires them to do affordable housing. The main point is this: the overall balance of planning gain and loss is now negative. I'll read this again carefully. Overall planning gain and loss is now negative in circumstances where, 1, the site cannot deliver any affordable housing contribution and help meet need. That's the first point. The site cannot deliver any affordable housing contribution and help meet need. Second point, the site does not meet local plan INF3 and green infrastructure biodiversity SPD, as we've seen in the officer's report. So point 2 does not meet local plan INF3 and green infrastructure biodiversity SPD. Point 3 does not meet housing mix requirements. Point 4 has a negative impact on heritage. Point 5, site has difficult sight lines on a road with speeding traffic. All of those are relevant considerations, and we are entitled to form a judgment about whether the balance is now positive or negative in a circumstance where there's no affordable housing. And I'm saying that the balance is now clearly negative and we should reject it.
Can I just possibly have a conversation about point 1? And he's talking about the financial viability in the site that can't deliver affordable homes. And you're saying that's a reason for a
I'm saying that because the site can So I'm saying that because the site cannot contribute to our housing need for affordable homes, that is a reason that changes the balance of plus and minus. Previously, I voted for it because I felt it was able to offset all those negatives because it provided a hefty contribution to our local need for affordable housing. Now it no longer makes that contribution. The balance of gain and loss has changed and become negative. That's my argument.
I appreciate it's a balancing act, but aren't we almost saying then that we shouldn't take into account financial viability assessments?
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that if a financial viability assessment proves that we cannot build affordability and we require affordability, we have to rethink whether we need the site in the first place.
Oh no, I was just going to mention paragraph 2.4 of the officer's report. But just to reread that, I'll let the planning officer obviously explain, but I was just looking at the Constitution as well, just to make sure that we're making a good decision here, that 10.5 of the conduct of planning committees, where planning committee is minded to approve or refuse a planning application contrary to the recommendation of the head of planning and or planning development management or the development plan. Consideration should be given to deferring the item unless agreement can be reached at the meeting on the planning reasons for that decision, which must be fully minuted as well. So we are entitled to debate what those reasons are, or we can defer the decision to discuss those reasons further before we agree to just refuse outright. Also, I was just reminding you on, so I'm just trying to find it now, it's mentioned it in the report there. So evidence of viability has been independently appraised by the council and it does conclude that the scheme would not be viable. And I appreciate your point that the necessary exceptional circumstance required under policy H2 and the affordable housing SPD are considered to have been demonstrated. Whilst there would be conflict in the absence of off-site public open space, in the overall planning balance, the planning officers have come down in favour of the scheme. So I think the position is that the planning balance now and the reasons for refusal, which we could try and agree today, or you could defer, you have power to defer the decision to discuss that further.
So, sorry, Chair, I mean, just to clarify something I heard in the debate earlier, that there is actually no permission on the site, no permission was ever granted. The former Craven District Council resolved to grant the planning permission, but because the legal agreement wasn't signed, it wasn't ever granted. So
okay,
there's no fallback,
and
my fault. I just thought it would be important to clarify that. In terms of members' exercise of the planning balance, I just emphasise that your starting point is section 38(6)(72) of the Planning Act. This is an allocated site and it accords with it. I'm not convinced that in the absence of any objection from the Highway Authority as statutory consultee, an important material consideration, that it could be demonstrated that the scheme would be harmful to highway safety. The last resolution of the former council was very clear on the fact that it wouldn't. And while there is no fallback position, that probably created a legitimate expectation for the applicant in that the local highway authority have no objection. We don't have evidence to counter the independent appraisal of the viability evidence submitted, but just to help, I think what I'm hearing is that notwithstanding the site allocated, notwithstanding the fact it would still deliver 11 homes to the local housing supply, which is an important consideration in itself, that the conflict with INF3 and the affordable housing policy outweighs the benefits. But
yes.
Just very quickly, Chair, so I would withdraw my reason 5 on that advice, but none of the other reasons.
Councillor Heseltine.
No.
Councillor Ireton. It's been a long day. I've never had an eye test ever, anything. Councillor Ireton, you did
I have nothing else to say, Councillor Brown.
I'm not sure there's any more that anyone can add at the moment.
Well, I've made a clear proposal with 4 documented
well,
reasons.
you've made a clear proposal and then you've removed parts of it, so can you just go through what you're proposing over again?
I'll repeat it again.
I will have to ensure they're all obviously included, as I know they will be with the development plan and material considerations. So, would you like to have a word as well? No, feel free.
So we can't take questions from the floor, I'm afraid.
No, sorry, I was just going to...
Please feel, no?
I was just going to say, in terms of the reasons, because I've not obviously heard the reasons for reviews, it may be a case that we look to maybe defer them and then just bring them back to the next meeting, because I would just want to be sure that we've got strong reasons that we can easily, that we can defend. So it was just to highlight that if we go down that route, really.
I think that's what I was trying to aim at, that you have an option to defer. No, perfect summing up there. Just so that
in the pursuit of harmony, I will propose that the committee is minded to conclude that the overall balance of planning gain and loss is negative in circumstances where 1, the site cannot deliver any affordable housing and contribute to that important need. 2, does not meet local plan INF 3 and green infrastructure biodiversity SPD. 3, does not meet housing mix requirements. And 4, has a negative impact on heritage.
I'll still second that.
So, sorry, it was minded to conclude. Do you want to defer it or?
You're wanting to defer this?
In other words, we're minded to the officers bring us back next time what you've asked for.
A justification for what we're after.
Yeah.
And Councillor Heseltine has seconded.
Some bloke seconded.
So to be clear, it's a vote to defer the application. Yes? To bring back reasons based on
that we're minded
on your
to,
work.
yes.
You're minded to conclude that four reasons, wasn't it?
You're being very kind.
Yeah.
Okay, are we happy with that?
Yeah, can I just add something to that? Sorry.
No.
Just so the members are aware, obviously we're heading into Christmas, so the deadlines for the January committee is actually to the end of this week. So just to be realistic, I doubt if we will get it to the January meeting, so probably expect it to be before you for the February meeting. Just wanted you to be aware.
Yeah, good enough.
Should we go to the vote? Right. All those in favour of Councillor Owen Brown's proposal? Any abstentions? Against? Okay. Right then, moving on to item 8, any other items of business?
I'm sure we have plenty.
We haven't got anything for anyone.
Any other items of business anyone wants to discuss today within this meeting? That can be a no. Okay, right, so the date of the next meeting is Tuesday the 7th of January at 2025 at 1 p.m. at a venue to be decided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.